Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our presentation today. My name is Mark Rosen, and I work for an organization called Learning in Retirement. What we do is we have a program for people who want to keep their minds active, who are passionate about learning. And we offer 3 programs, 3 terms a year. So we start in the fall. We have a winter program going on right now that's 8 weeks, and a spring program coming up that is going to be 7 weeks for most of our classes. Where are we located? We are located at Westfield Shopping Mall in the COD classrooms, which is adjacent to World Gym. There's a back door, says COD on it. You go in, and we have 4 classrooms back there. And in order to register for our classes, you have to go online, and I'm going to show you that in a minute. And for those of you who are Canadians or going to be returning and not being able to take our spring classes, I would suggest that if you're interested, you might want to go to our website today when you get home, and I'll show you the button. You can push a button to sign up for all of our information, registration deadlines, and our classes, and you'll have everything at your disposal. And it's something you can do today, so you don't have to wait, and it's fresh in your mind after the presentation today. Yes, to register. And all of our registration is online. So it's very convenient, and our classes are 2 hours in length, and again, range in length from about 6 to 7 weeks. Our biggest term is the winter, so we can accommodate most of you. And this winter, we're offering 33 classes, just to give you an idea. We've been around for 24 years, but the reason we're here today is because, you know what? They say LIR. Well, what is that? You're the best kept secret in the desert. Well, because you're here today, we're no longer a secret, right? So feel free to give the information that you see and we're able to pick up at the back today to your friends. Most of our people come to us by word of mouth, and they do because they love our programs. My background is political science, education, and counseling. I've taught the school system, I've taught adults, I've taught high school kids, and I've been with LIR for almost 10 years now. I teach a class called Controversial Issues and another class called Be a Better Photographer, which is very useful for a lot of you that even use your iPhones or phones to take pictures and want to get better pictures and that sort of thing. Most of our people have advanced degrees, and all of us are volunteers. Why are we paid? Well, what are we paid? We're paid with your passion and our own passion for what we do, and we love that. And that's a little bit about LIR. And I probably forgot something, but I'll be yelled at later for forgetting it. I feel kind of like a rock star. I've never been able to be in front of this many people at one time, so thank you for coming. All right, so first of all, this is a list of our spring classes, and we have a copy of it in the back if you haven't picked it up yet. But you can take 5 classes for $60. It's a fabulous deal. They're each 2 hours long, and they're each 7 to 8 weeks long, depending on the term. So it's the best deal in the desert, and we really love our classes, and so will you. So for those of you who are only here for part of the time and not here for our spring classes, there's a way to take action today if you want to be notified of registration deadlines, classes, changes. If you go to our website, which is listed at the top, lirpalmdesert.com, and you go to the front page, which is the page that will come up, it says New to LIR, click here to receive email updates. Okay, so that's right there. Click here to receive email updates, fill out a real brief form, take you about 20 seconds, and then you'll get our blasts, and you'll be right up to date on everything that's happening. It's a way to get involved today because otherwise you might forget about us for a while, and this way you're on our lists. Okay? All right, so today's presentation is social media versus privacy. And I think you'll get a lot out of this information today, and there will be some things that you haven't thought about, and that's why we're doing it. We think it's a public service for you to know a lot about what's going on, because a lot of this affects your privacy, it affects the privacy of your grandchildren, it affects jobs, it affects opportunities, and also politics in our democracy. We'll have time at the end of the presentation for some questions, but for now what I want to do is just kind of present the PowerPoint to you so you can see what's going on. First, I thought we'd start with a little cartoon, and the way I go is because I know some of you can't see very well, or some of you can't hear very well, so I read and I give the information as I show the slides. Mr. Zuckerberg, how can you be so confident about regaining the trust of the American people? Of course, Zuckerberg is the CEO and founder of Facebook. Well, unlike Congress, I'm going to try. This is a job interview, and it gives you a little bit of an idea, and it's kind of got a funny ending. I thought you'll enjoy it. So I do a combination of evidence-based slides that you'll see, and also video clips that I edit so that they're not too long, but just long enough to give you an essence of what's going on. Let's watch the video.
Amy, it says you are trained in technology. That's very good. Are you adept at Excel?
No.
PowerPoint?
No.
Publisher?
Not really.
Exactly in what area of technology are you proficient?
Snapchat, Pinterest, Instagram, Vine, Twitter. You know, the big ones.
I'm surprised you didn't say Facebook.
That's for old people, like my parents.
And in fact, it's mostly older people that are using that particular social media program. And we'll talk a lot about Facebook today, as well as some of the other ones. But first of all, let's start with a quote from Microsoft founder Bill Gates. Historically, privacy was almost implicit because it was hard to find and gather information. But in the digital world, whether it's digital cameras or satellites or just what you click on, we need to have more explicit rules, not just for governments, but for private companies. And the problem is that most of these internet websites, most of the internet is unregulated. And we're in a deregulatory environment right now anyway. And that poses an interesting dilemma for Congress. And so they've had several of these folks, including Mark Zuckerberg, before them, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But these are some of the most popular social media platforms. This is one that I found particularly interesting. 50%, so half of adults, use social media as a major source for news. And as you can imagine, social media, anyone can put any news on social media, whether it's true or not, as well as most of the internet. You don't know what you're getting. And there's a lot of disinformation out there that affects how we think and what we believe. And that's a problem. But this is how many people, 2.27 billion monthly users for Facebook worldwide. YouTube, which is also owned by Google, has 1.9 million monthly users. Instagram, which is owned by Facebook. Do you see some consolidation up here of industries and of companies? And of course, Congress is looking at that right now in terms of having too much influence, being too consolidated. And they're looking at possibly breaking up some of these companies because of that power that they have. LinkedIn, which is a career-oriented networking site, has 575 million users, okay? And Twitter, 336 monthly users worldwide, 336 million monthly users. So you can see how many people are using these platforms. It's huge. And this gives you a visual chart showing that YouTube is really used by most people. And YouTube is fantastic. You can learn how to rebuild a toilet on YouTube. For those of you who have the honey-do lists, you can learn just about anything from YouTube. In fact, if you want to see a copy of this video today, you can go to Rancho Mirage on the YouTube channel and find a copy of this video if you want to watch it again and get some of this information again, or pass it along to one of your friends. And then you'll see Facebook is way up here. So these are the two that are used the most, YouTube and Facebook. And then you have some that are down here that are used a little less, primarily by younger people. And what's happened here, between 2018 and 2019, you're seeing kind of a leveling off and actually a decrease in use for some of these other programs. And believe me, they'll be replaced by other ones coming along. This is a very dynamic industry and a very powerful industry. So how does Facebook earn money? And this is kind of interesting. I picked up this video, and I learned quite a bit about how Facebook makes money. And I want you to pay attention especially to people who are friends of Facebook users. You may or may not be a friend, or people who pick out certain links. So watch the video and tell me if you are at all concerned or very impressed.
Facebook is free to use. So how is it worth $100 billion? Let's look to Hollywood for an answer for that question. There's a great scene in The Social Network, the 2010 drama about Facebook founder Mark Zuckerberg, where Zuckerberg is given the following advice from one of his partners. Facebook is cool, and that's what it's got going for it. You don't want to ruin it with ads, because ads aren't cool. In the film, Mark initially agrees. Ads on websites generally are not cool, but Facebook has ads. You've probably seen them before. They're on the right side of your screen whenever you log in. In fact, Facebook has had ads for a while, pretty much since 2007, back when it was still only available for users who were in college or high school. And in 2011, according to the information Facebook released for their upcoming initial public offering, 85% of the $3.7 billion that the company made came from advertising. They use a specific strategy called targeted advertising that involves creating customized ads specific to the interests of individual users based on the data that knowingly and unknowingly they provide. Now, granted, Facebook is hardly the first to use targeted advertising. Google's been doing it longer than Facebook has, catering ads to individual web users based on what they search for, as well as what they write about when using Google's email service. But Facebook's approach is unique because it serves as a social network in which users log in and often share an incredible amount of personal information about themselves. For example, in order to set up an account, first you are asked to include all sorts of private information like your age, where you live, your phone number, what you do for a living, favorite TV shows, moving bands, and so on and so forth. And that's just the beginning. Once you start actively using Facebook by, posting photos and liking things, the amount of data adds up quickly, much faster than you might expect. Think about it. Let's say you post on your wall that you're going to dinner at an expensive Spanish tapas restaurant in the Mission. Well, now Facebook knows where you like to hang out, what type of food you like to eat, and even how much you might be willing to consider spending on food. All that just from one wall post. There's actually a law student from Austria named Max Schrems who went to court with Facebook to see in real life all of the information it had gathered on him. Basically, he wanted a paper trail of his Facebook activity, and he got it. All 1,222 pages of it. And this is a guy who claims to only use the site about once a week. In recent years, Facebook has even figured out how to gather data on people when they're not even on the website itself. You know all those like buttons that you see pretty much everywhere on the internet? Yeah, well, if you click on one of those, even if you're not on Facebook, Facebook gets data about you. And then there's Facebook Connect, which has been around since late 2008, that allows you to log into other websites using your Facebook account. For example, there's Spotify, the music sharing service. Well, if you log into Spotify through Facebook, well, guess what? Facebook collects the data about what you do and listen to on Spotify. With all of the like buttons on the internet and how many websites are using Facebook Connect, and the mere fact that there are 800 million registered users with Facebook, it's pretty clear that the company is gathering a staggering amount of data. Facebook also gives advertisers access to other friends that are part of each user's social network in an effort to make their ads that much more appealing. So a targeted ad will pop up in your Facebook profile, one that based on your interests you're probably going to like anyway. But the ad will also show which of your friends have gone out of the way to like that product.
Okay, so that's how Facebook makes money, with ads, even though the original idea was, ads aren't cool, right? Well, ads are making almost 90% of the revenue for Facebook, because every time you click on an ad, that ad pays, okay? And the ads are placed on the page based on how much the advertiser wants to pay for that click, all right? And so that's how they get up there. But it's not only you that clicks on things. If you have a social network, which is how Facebook works, the friends that you have on your network will also be part of this ad gathering and information gathering system that they have. So how could this be misused? You can probably imagine. Let's talk about our democracy. A company called Cambridge Analytica was famous for a while because they were able to get information, data from Facebook based on a psychological survey that the people saw on Facebook who were there on the network, and they were simply asked, do you want to fill this thing out? Find out some nice and interesting information about you. And that's all the people knew, right? So a lot of people filled this thing out. About 270,000 people, in fact, filled this survey out. And it resulted in data through the network that they were able to gather through the friends, the likes, and all these other connections. And that data grew into a database of 87 million from 270,000. That's how networking works. Let's watch this video from Cambridge Analytica.
Could they replicate the academics' work profiling people's personalities on Facebook on a massive scale across the American electorate?
I'm Alex, I'm the CEO.
And through Chris Wiley, their specialist, Cambridge academic Alexander Kogan. Already on Facebook, permitted to gather users' data for research purposes, but who now agreed to get much more and share it commercially. The blueprint for the company which would become Cambridge Analytica.
Kogan didn't make any money off of it. He did it for free. And what he got out of it was the giant data set, and what CA got out of it was also data. Everyone got data, but Cambridge Analytica paid for it directly. If you look here in the underlying source code,
which I wouldn't normally see.
No, you wouldn't normally see.
It worked like this. Thousands of Facebook users were paid to download an app to fill out a personality survey with their consent, which in turn let Dr. Kogan capture the user's underlying data and then share it with Cambridge Analytica.
So very simplistically, you're going into the code behind the Facebook page, you're dragging out these ID numbers, you're putting them into an algorithm, and out comes a prediction of how you're likely to vote.
Yes.
Simple and smart, because the app didn't just mine the respondents' data, crucially it swept up that of their friends too, those who hadn't adjusted their privacy settings.
Imagine I go and ask you, I say, hey, if I give you $1, $2, could you fill out the survey for me? Just do it on this app. And you say, fine, right? I don't just capture what your responses are. I capture all of the information about you from Facebook. But also, this app then crawls through your social network and captures all of that data also. So by you filling out my survey, I capture 300 records on average, right? And so that means that all of a sudden, I only need to engage 50,000, 70,000, 100,000 people to get a really big data set really quickly. And it scaled really quickly. We were able to get upwards of 50 million plus Facebook records in the span of a couple months.
50 million?
Yeah, over 50 million records from Facebook using this method.
And how many of those people behind those profiles were aware that their profiles had been used in this way?
Almost none. Facebook, at least in a technical sense, facilitated the project because they had applications that had these permissions in the first place.
They've also been at pains to stress this wasn't a data breach in the sense that users by consent and friends through their default privacy settings agreed to Dr. Kogan capturing their data, and they say they've since improved their systems.
It allowed us to move into the hearts and minds of American voters in a way that had never been done before.
There's real data from the Republican primary.
Enabling them, as their boss Alexander Nix showed Channel 4 News 2 years ago, to micro-target different personality types with bespoke, emotionally resonant messages.
Someone who's neurotic is someone who's quite emotional and might respond in this case to a stimulus of fear.
Yes. So they were able to get all these records from not only the people that filled out the psychological survey, but they were able to sweep up their friends because their friends had similar tastes and feelings as they did. And then what they did was they targeted voters for the 2016 election in key states. But the difference between TV targeting and this kind of targeting is that they can target individual users. Individuals who go on various social networks, because it could be Google, it could be anywhere, where you will get a targeted advertisement or a short video ad that's targeted to your psychological profile. That's never been done before. And it's being used more and more and more. And when they talk about privacy settings, that's a key element. We'll talk about how to watch out for those default settings, because most of these networks have default settings that allow the social network company to have maximum access to your data unless you set it up otherwise. And we'll talk about that. So how many had personal information exposed? In mid-March, the New York Times, along with The Guardian and The Observer, reported that Cambridge Analytica and its British counterpart had harvested the data of 50 million Facebook users. Remember, those users had no idea what was happening to this data. Through an app, this was a psychological survey called This Is Your Digital Life, which offered personality quizzes. At the time when Facebook users installed the apps connected to the platform, they also exposed data from many of their friends to the app developer as well, through the networking. When the news broke, Facebook confirmed that only 270,000 people had downloaded the app. We don't even know how many of them filled out the psychological survey. We just know that 270,000 downloaded the app. But Facebook, until now, had never refuted reports that 50 million users' data had been accessed through that 270,000. They later increased the number to 87 million users. That's the power of networking. That's the power of the data of your friends and everyone who clicks on likes and so forth that they can get a hold of and can misuse it. Who was Cambridge Analytica? Cambridge Analytica was a British political consulting firm which combined misappropriation of digital assets, data mining, which is what we talked about, data brokerage, selling data, and data analysis with strategic communication. So they made the ads, or they had the ads made to fit those profiles that they were getting during the electoral process. The company was partly owned by the family of Robert Mercer, an American hedge fund manager who supports many politically conservative causes. In 2015, Cambridge Analytica performed data analysis services for Ted Cruz's presidential campaign, and in 2016 for Donald Trump's presidential campaign. The campaigns weren't doing anything illegal. They were using the data that Cambridge Analytica had derived from them in order to accentuate and to reach out to voters in a variety of ways. And the last piece here, Steve Bannon was a co-founder and vice president of Cambridge Analytica. He denied knowing about the purchase of the Facebook data. What happened to Cambridge Analytica? Cambridge Analytica closed operations in May of 2018 due to legal problems, scandals, and bankruptcy. But they're not gone yet. Facebook banned the company from advertising on its platform because, remember, they had fraudulently dealt with Facebook, right? Facebook and them basically made this thing happen. And finally, Cambridge Analytica is now reconstituted and operating with many of the original directors as a new company called Emerdata. And there are many Cambridge Analyticas out there, not just the one we're talking about. And political campaigns from both sides are using this kind of data. Hopefully It's data that's been approved of the users, but we don't know that you're approving the use of your data for political advertising. Didn't Obama use Facebook in his campaigns? Yes, he did. The Obama campaign created a Facebook app for supporters to donate, learn of voting requirements, and find nearby houses to canvass. The app asked users permission to scan their photos, friends lists, and news feeds. Most users complied. So the users gave permission to give them all of the other data from their friends and other connections so that the campaign could contact them too. Okay? The people signing up knew the data they were handing over would be used to support a political campaign, Obama's campaign. Their friends, however, did not. Their friend network did not know what their data was being used for. Social media is being used as much or more than TV advertising today by politicians, all right? Because of the ability to micro-target, the ability to get information out there very, very quickly, and to have it multiplied. Because you can simply include your own network, so from my network to your network to that person's network, that's how it all spreads, geometrically. It's just amazing how quick this information travels, and that's why social media is huge. So right now, I know the Sanders campaign is very actively using it, and a lot of other campaigns are as well. But Zuckerberg apologized.
This was a major breach of trust, and I'm really sorry that this happened. We have a basic responsibility to protect people's data, and if we can't do that, then we don't deserve to have the opportunity to serve people. So our responsibility now is to make sure that this doesn't happen again. And there are a few basic things that I think we need to do to ensure that. One is making sure that developers like Alexander Kogan, who got access to a lot of information and then improperly used it, just don't get access to as much information going forward.
So he apologized. We accept that, right? Well, Congress didn't accept it. Steve Scalise, and Zuckerberg's been before Congress a couple of times because Congress needs to know what's going on. First of all, these are gigantic companies. They're gathering up private data. There's relatively little regulation on these companies, and so there's some concern. Representative Steve Scalise, a Republican from Louisiana who is a former computer programmer, focused on how extensively Facebook tracks users who aren't logged into the network or don't even have an account. Scary. Representative Ben Lujan asked Zuckerberg this question: how many data points does Facebook have on each Facebook user? These are people who are registered on Facebook. Zuckerberg said he didn't know. Lujan enlightened him. It's been reported that Facebook has as many as 29,000 data points for an average non-Facebook user. Those are the friends and the clickers. Are you a friend of a Facebook user? Well, Congress wasn't happy with what they saw, and so Facebook was fined $5 billion by the FTC, Federal Trade Commission, and they were told they have to update and adopt new privacy and security measures. Okay? Let's see how effective that is. So Facebook must pay a record-breaking $5 billion fine as part of a settlement with the Federal Trade Commission, by far the largest penalty ever imposed on a company for violating consumers' privacy rights. Facebook also agreed to adopt new protections for the data users share on the social network. So they agreed to that. Let's move into a slightly different area. Because social networks are used by our friends, our own people, our audience, like you, myself, and also by our people who are not necessarily friendly to us, who want to use the social network to influence you politically or socially, or to create distrust, or to create misinformation, or to gather other people around ideas that can create problems in our country. Posts from 3 now removed Facebook groups. Facebook, remember, can take down a group at any time. They can take down anything off their network. They own it. Okay? So posts from 3 now removed Facebook groups created by the Russian Internet Research Agency suggest Russia sought not only to meddle in U.S. politics, but to encourage ideologically opposed groups to act out violently against one another. For example, Being Patriotic stated in an April 2016 post on Facebook that Black Lives Matter activists who disrespected the American flag should be immediately shot. The account accrued 200,000 followers before it was shut down. The group Secured Borders had the most violent rhetoric, some of it well after the presidential election. A post in March 2017 described the threat of dangerous illegal aliens and said, the only way to deal with them is to kill them all. And there are thousands, in some cases hundreds of thousands of folks that are seeing these messages that are designed to get them to possibly take action or at least create an idea. Millions of tweets spread anti-Semitic messages. Here's another one. It's an echo chamber. Millions of anti-Semitic messages on Twitter, which is another social network we talked about, have spread negative stereotypes and conspiracy theories about Jews across the social media platform, according to a report Monday by the Anti-Defamation League. Anti-Semitic, what does it result in? Anti-Semitic hate crimes are on the rise, up 57% in 2017 from 2016. 1 year, up 57%. The largest single-year jump on record, according to the Anti-Defamation League. Again, this kind of communication, this kind of echo chamber, this kind of misinformation and of propaganda can motivate people to take action, and sometimes it's not the best action. 126 million Americans were exposed to Russian propaganda. Let's see what it says. Facebook informed lawmakers, this was in Congress, this week that roughly 126 million Americans may have been exposed to content generated on its platform by the Russian government-linked troll farm known as the Internet Research Agency between June 2015 and August 2017. And they are still at it. Other headlines from other media sources. NPR reported Russia continues to use social media to influence public opinion. Public opinion. U.S. official says Russia is using social media to divide Americans. That's what Russia wants to do. Not only Russia, but other countries as well. Russia's disinformation campaign to divide Americans. This is a report that was done in Congress. It was commissioned by the Republican-controlled Senate. This is December of 2018. Says the Russian trolls' efforts focused on a few main objectives: pushing African-American voters to boycott the election and giving them misinformation about how to vote. In other words, the polls close at a certain time, right? They were giving this information, targeting those voters, when that was incorrect information, so they may have missed the chance to vote. How to vote. Getting Latino voters to distrust the United States government, encouraging extreme right-wing voters to be more confrontational. Think Charlottesville. And spreading false stories and conspiracy theories. However, is Russia the only country exploiting social media to influence elections? Absolutely not. Russia has the most skill, though, of any of our foreign counterparts. The second greatest amount of skill is held by a country called China. The third, Iran, and the fourth, North Korea. These are the four most advanced and powerful hackers, okay, out there. And they saw what happened in 2016. And they also saw that not as much action had taken place on the part of our Congress. Congress, for example, appropriated $220 million to invest in voting machines and secure state elections. Because remember that states control their own elections and they can have all kinds of different ways of voting and that sort of thing depending on the state. Congress passed that. The Senate did not bring it up for a vote. So there are lots of holes out there still, but not only Russia, some of these other countries may take advantage of going forward. Facebook ex-security chief Alex Stamos, former chief security officer, is less concerned about what Cambridge Analytica did in the past than about the 2020 Cambridge Analyticas that still exist, lawfully buying their data from other sources, like social media, your data. Stamos had given the company's audit committee an unexpectedly unvarnished account of the extent of the Russian interference. It took Facebook more than a year after several denials to finally admit the extent of Russian interference in the 2016 election. This is another interesting end. And we're talking about censorship, and we have a variety of ideas about this, and this is a tricky issue. Facebook again refuses to ban political ads, even false ones. Facebook, Twitter, and Google refused to remove a misleading video ad recently that targeted opponents of one political party. It was blatantly false, blatantly misrepresentative, but these networks left it on their sites. And there's a reason. Facebook has repeatedly insisted it won't fact-check political ads. CEO Mark Zuckerberg has argued that political speech is important and that Facebook doesn't want to interfere with it. Critics say that stance gives politicians a license to lie, as if they needed a license. TV stations and networks. Now, here's what the comparison is, and this is why they're taking the stance that they're taking. TV stations and TV networks aren't required to fact-check ads either, but social media gives candidates a certain advantage, the ability to micro-target their ads so they pop up on your computer, something that the regular networks cannot do. Okay? But this goes back to a law as far as TV advertising goes. A law dating to the Communications Act of 1934 requires broadcast stations to run ads from candidates as is. The candidates pay for the ads. They can lie in the ads or whatever. They're required to run them as is. However, this law, of course, 1934, we didn't have too much digital in 1934, right? This ad does not apply to cable, satellite, wireless, or the internet. This law does not apply. So it's wide open. It can go either way. The norm on TV media is to grant politicians wide latitude with attack ads, but not to run those that are demonstrably false and blatantly false. Okay? But they still have wide latitude, and they are very seldom ever challenged. And that's why you see some of these outrageous ads that are on there. And we're still seeing them. And now we're seeing them on social media as well. The Communications Act of 1934 is a complicated government document, but broadcasters interpret it to mean that they are not in the business of censoring statements of a political candidate. That's TV. Is it any different for social media? Well, the law doesn't apply to social media. Should they monitor and censor false ads? Could the censorship be politically motivated? That's a problem, isn't it? Who's going to censor it? Are they going to censor it according to their own political beliefs? And they say, well, I think that might be true. Well, maybe not. Well, okay. Are you going to put your trust in that censorship there? Or should they censor? Are there some that are so blatantly false that they should be thrown off the media network? And they are taking down ads, but not political ads yet. This is the ads that are taken down. Facebook removed more than 3 billion fake accounts, because you can have a Facebook account that's a computer. It's a robot. You can have a Twitter person that's really a computer and could put out millions of ads in minutes. All right? Facebook removed more than 3 billion fake accounts from October to March, and this is this last year. Twice as many as the previous 6 months, the company said. So they're working on it, but there's a problem. In a new report, Facebook said it saw a steep increase in the creation of abusive fake accounts. While most of these fake accounts were blocked within minutes of their creation, the use of computers to generate millions of accounts at a time meant that not only that Facebook caught more of the fake accounts, but that more of them slipped through. That's a problem. How can they control it? They're trying. They have their own computers looking for these fake ads with keywords and so forth. They've hired thousands of workers to help out, but it's mostly computers that do the work, right? Because there's no way they can have anybody looking at millions of accounts. They're coming from around the world all the time. Very difficult to control, very difficult to monitor. We have a census coming up, don't we? 2020 census. Is that important? I would think so. The count really determines a lot for us. It determines how much money this community is going to get from federal government for roads, for libraries, for all the services that we get. That's determined by the census. If you don't answer a census and you're not counted, it's going to cost your community $2,000 on the estimate, just for you not being counted, okay? And that's a problem because of what's happening. The U.S. Census Bureau is relying on outside help from social media companies, advocacy groups, and other government agencies to halt campaigns that try to discourage people from participating in the census in a once-a-decade head count through the spread of false information. False information is being spread through social media about the census, encouraging people not to be counted. The 2020 census will help determine how $1.5 trillion in federal spending is distributed. Who's going to get the money? Which communities will get the money? Based on how many people live in that community. They count heads. And how many congressional seats each state gets. So the number of Congress people, the number of electoral votes your state gets is determined by the head count in your state, as well as the distribution of all of that money for use by your community and your county and your state. Do you think it's important for every head to be counted? However, fake posts about the census began popping up days after the U.S. Supreme Court ruled last June that the Trump administration could not ask about citizenship status on the 2020 census. They were only going to ask citizens, the count, okay? But if we have undocumented people living in our community using our services, they wouldn't be counted. What will happen to the amount of benefits that the entire community will get or not get? That's a problem. Regardless of your politics, it's a benefit all of us would share in. This is a little video I found that I think will be very helpful. Maybe not so much for you directly, but a lot of your grandkids, or some cases your great-grandkids, might be actively involved in using social media. They might be actively involved in dating sites and getting information online, putting information out there. And there's a certain amount of caution that's necessary, don't you think? Let's take a look at this video. And there's no sound to it, but I just want you to kind of catch some of these numbers and some of the things they're talking about. First of all, and I can stop it, and I'll do that as we go, but teens spend 79% of their online time on social networks. 79% on social network. Big time interest on the part of teens. And you know that if you spend any time at all with your grandkids who are always looking at their phones. This is the kind of information that they share. Do you think that could be misused? 31% share content on social networks that they don't want their family or their teachers to see. Cyberbullying, 39%. Some teenagers, because of data that was put out there, have even committed suicide as a result. Colleges will often look at a person's profile on social network to see what they post. Employers check social networks to see what's posted. Only a few state or registered sex offenders are prevented from using the internet for social networking. 25% of the accounts are fake. Cyber criminals use it and spread malware that infects your computers. Is that a problem? I would think so. So part of today might be to talk to your grandkids and your great-grandkids and your kids if they're not already aware, because a lot of times people say, hell, it's no big deal, right? It could be. It could be a big deal. So what's happening about this? California Consumer Privacy Act was just put into law and in effect on January 1st of this year. What does it do? It will grant consumers the right to see the personal information that companies collect about them and stop them from selling it. The law is the California Consumer Privacy Act, or CCPA. However, there's a little bit of a glitch in this law that the French don't have, and I'll show you that one in a minute, but this is the bit of a glitch. The law still puts the onus on consumers to take the steps to protect their data. You have to take the step. The default is against you. So what do you have to do? So if you stream a lot of music on Spotify, for example, one of these sites, you have to send them a form. If you want to protect your data, you have to send the company a form directing them not to sell your data. You have to get the form from whatever social media company you're worried about, fill out the form, and email it back into them. You have to take action. If you don't take action, just like these other defaults that they set up on your accounts, they're wide open. The French took a little different approach. Because remember, these companies are worldwide. Google's another gigantic company. France fined Google $57 million, like a penny to them, right? For failing to comply with privacy laws. Europe is much more regulatory on the internet than we are. As part of the regulation, companies are required to get a user's genuine consent before collecting information about them. Do you see the difference between the California law, which probably will become national, and this one? Okay? That consent needs to happen in the form that the user explicitly opts in to share their data. So the default is they're not going to share your data in France. And in most of the European Union, it's the same law. They're not going to share your data unless you explicitly give them permission to share your data. Whereas California's and the United States, where we're leaning, is less regulatory. You have to send a form in to stop them from selling your data, or they'll sell it anyway. Okay? A new report from researchers at Stanford University and New York University looked at what happened to people who deactivated their accounts Now, I know that a lot of you use Facebook and enjoy it because it's a way of communicating with your family, sending pictures, getting updates. We don't write letters anymore, do we? And that's a great benefit, all right? But there's certain people who say, you know what? It's not worth it to have my privacy exposed like that. So some people, Facebook free people reported, being happier while not using the site, being less active online, and using other social media sites even less. These are people who deactivated their Facebook account. The study also found that subjects were less polarized politically, but less informed about factual news after being off Facebook for a month. All right? So there's a two-sided coin there. This is interesting. Does your internet history, a lot of us do research on the internet. I know I do all the time. And you have to be careful about this research. Google, which is a very, very easy to use research platform, Google tracks IP addresses. Those are the addresses of each individual computer. In the same way you have a mailing address, your computer has an address. We know where your computer is, and we know who's using that computer and where those emails are coming from and everything else. They can be located by your IP address, okay? So Google tracks these IP addresses to determine where you're searching. They want to know what you're searching for while you're using Google. For example, if you search for restaurants in one part of town and try it in another part, Google may suggest different restaurants. They're trying to make it easier for you. In other words, whatever you see on the Google page is a reflection of what you have put on that page previously and what you've clicked on previously. Just like ads will appear on the Google pages that match your interests, so too will stories. If you're like certain actors, they'll make it easy by putting these actors on the page. So when you do a Google search, it may be a very different page than when I do it or somebody else does it, okay? Because they're tracking your results, and they're giving you results to make your searching more efficient so you don't have to track through lots of pages. But that could be a problem, okay? That could be a problem because tracking biases in your searches might be a polarizer and might prevent you from seeing opposite ideas. And by seeing opposite ideas, we tend to broaden our points of view about things, which is not a bad idea if we want to become less polarized and less divided as a country. You can reduce personalized search results in the settings menu. However, it is not 100% successful in any browsers. What do I mean by that? And this is important. Some of the browsers, for example, you might use Internet Explorer, the Microsoft browser. You might use Firefox. You might use Google Chrome. And there's a variety of other browsers. If you want to reduce the tracking, you can set your defaults by going to the settings menu on those sites. They all have a settings menu. And you can find where you want to increase your privacy. Is it 100%? No. However, it does definitely help. And that's something you can do. The same way when you go on social media sites, when you go on Facebook, you can go to settings menu in Facebook and you can change the defaults so that you have more privacy. Is it foolproof? No, but it will improve your privacy and reduce, perhaps, the amount of data that they get. However, I'm not 100% convinced that it always works perfectly, but it's something at least you can do to make it better. So, by review, what can you do to help protect your privacy online? Well, the easiest thing to do is not to go online. But a lot of us don't want to do that because we spend a lot of time online. And we use Google, and we use YouTube, and we use Facebook, and we use all these other networks, okay? But you can do certain things to help. And that's what I just talked about, setting the privacy defaults. Go to the settings menu in your Facebook or other social media accounts and increase your privacy and permissions. Many of the internet browsers like Google Chrome, Firefox, Explorer, etc. also have settings menu which give you the options of greater privacy. So you may want to check that out. If you're confused and you don't know how to do it, go to YouTube. Because YouTube, just put in a few words like, how can I increase my privacy settings on Facebook? And you will find some YouTubes of step-by-step ways that you can accomplish that. Isn't that great? If your wife wants to learn how to change your tire on the car, send her to YouTube. Or call AAA. All right. More privacy concerns. Be careful. Careful of who you friend. Guard your private information, especially with strangers. Think about those dating sites. You don't know who those people are. They could be a sex offender. Who knows? They could be anybody. They are not who they represent themselves to be. You see this wonderful, beautiful picture of someone? Maybe that was taken 50 years ago. Online dating services can produce good and bad results. People do get married and they find wonderful mates online, and I know that's happening in millions of cases, and that's wonderful. I'm just saying you got to be cautious. Want to reduce ad targeting? Avoid clicking on those like buttons where they're going to gather data about you. And log into Facebook buttons to make it easier for you to find something. You log into those things, you click on those buttons. Every click provides data that you don't want to necessarily provide, and data from your own network of all your friends that will probably think similarly to you. They'll get that data as well. Don't click on ads on pages you visit. As soon as you click on an ad, boom, you're going to see that ad come up over and over again, or similar companies' ads. Because they share through the computer networking of ads. You click on an ad and they'll say, oh yeah, I guess the person likes Corvettes. So all of a sudden you see a whole bunch of different Corvette ads come up, or sports cars, or color red, or whatever it is. What you or your grandchildren post on the web is public and cannot be deleted. Now there are occasions when it can be, but for the most part, you put a video on Snapchat or Instagram of a party where people are going wild, right? That's going to stay there. And it could be accessed by an employer or a college. Do you want that information to be there forever? If you don't put it on there. Your turn. So we've been chatting here for about an hour or so, and I think they will probably put up the lights. And what I thought I would start out with, and I'm certainly not an expert on social media other than what you've seen today from my own research, but I thought I'd put up some questions. I have a series of questions, and we'll take a little while for anyone to ask a question. I think we have some microphones in the back, so if you raise your hand and would like to venture an answer to one of these questions, let's start with these three questions. So the first one is the way social media sites like Facebook make money antithetical to privacy? Is their business plan contradictory to the whole idea of protecting privacy because they sell ads the way they do? That's question number one. Number two, can social media be used to subvert or aid the democratic process? And how? Think of Cambridge Analytica and all the Cambridge Analyticas that are still out there on both sides of on all sides of the political spectrum, helping anybody that wants to pay for their services. And number three, should the federal government regulate social media sites, and how? Anybody have a hand up, like to take any of these or comment on any of these? If not, we'll go to the next set. All right. Should social media companies censor extreme or inciting speech? And who decides it? Should they censor political ads? And who should decide it? Number 5, what criteria should social media sites use to take down posts? Number 6, Facebook is considering the purchase of some local newspapers to include local news on their site. Is this a good idea? Anybody want to comment on this? Or any other questions or comments that you might have on anything we've talked about so far? Such a quiet audience. Ah, we have a hand. We have a hand. That's a good thing. Okay, great. By the way we work with LIR classes is they're very interactive. And so we have lots of interchange. You wait to the end. We had to wait to the end today because of the way they operate and the size of the audience. But when you're in our classrooms, we have a lot of interplay back and forth throughout the presentation. So please, yes.
Quick question on the fine that Zuckerman or Google had to pay, Facebook had to pay. Where does that money go? That $50 billion or million, whatever it was. Five million.
The great thing about putting a fine on a company is it's usually done by government, so they get the money. Government gets the money. They have to spend a certain amount of money to regulate, to process the whole thing through, to have your congressman show up and interview Zuckerberg and research what's going on with all these companies, and that's the way that they get compensated. The problem is that the amounts of the fine, especially the French fine, a few $1 million is infinitesimal. It doesn't matter to them. So sometimes companies, and you know it's not just these companies, will pay the fine because paying the fine costs them less in the long run than continuing to violate the privacy, you see? Unless the fine is super high. At least the one we presided was a little bit higher. Other questions? Have some hands up over here and over here. Yeah, let's take this gentleman on the side here.
Has the European way of regulation been specifically rejected in America?
Has it been rejected?
Rejected.
No, I think they're looking at it. Right now, Congress is really looking at more and more of these kinds of concerns about protecting privacy. They have a model out there, but whether or not they want to go with the European model is still up in the air. We tend to go a little less regulatory. As I mentioned before, we're in a deregulatory environment right now, and that may prove to be a different kind of an approach than the Europeans have, which is a little heavier on regulation. Yeah, over here?
Yeah, in terms of questions 4 and 5, where is the law in all of this? Is there a law federally, statewide, with respect to hate speech and the like? Are there legal criteria that social media sites could use to take down posts? Insofar as the newspaper world is concerned, is the thinking that the local newspaper newsrooms would be firewalled from the rest of Facebook, if you will?
That's a multi-part question. I'll do my best. The 1934 law that I talked about pertains to TV media. And that's when they're not censoring those kinds of ads. But remember, that law does not apply to anything in digital or social media. So the answer to the question is very little legal regulation on what's out there right now. And so they're looking at individual cases rather than passing laws. Now, California passed a law, that privacy law that makes you have to opt in and fill out a form. That's at least a step in the right direction. That's a specific law. It applies to doing business in California, pretty big state, 6th largest economy in the world, right? But whether that transfers into a national law, we don't know. Again, we're in a deregulatory environment. That's the problem. There are laws about insightful speech, and the attorneys know about those laws, but the social media companies have been very reluctant to censor anything online. You can build a bomb online. You can, for a while, I'll give you a good example. Do you remember about a year ago, there was a gentleman who put online how to build a gun, plastic gun. Remember that case? All right, well, that was challenged, and after it's challenged, then yes, laws can apply. So the judge made I think it was Facebook or Google, take that down after 13 million people had downloaded those instructions, okay? And the reason they took it down is because of the gun laws, okay, and interstate commerce, that it was against the law that way. Next question.
I hope this is relevant. The future, you've got vast knowledge, a lot more than I'll ever have on this subject. So my question would be, at the moment, everything moves pretty slowly in terms of the internet. Soon we're going to have 5G. That's 100 times faster, perhaps, than what's happening now. We've got IT, and we've got robots. Now, hopefully that's a relevant question, but with your knowledge, I'd love to hear your prediction for the near future, let alone the distant future, which would be impossible. Thank you for a great lecture and your answer.
Yeah, thank you for the question. I'm not an expert. First of all, let me start with that. But if you take a look at 5G, which is going to increase the speed and capability of all digital media, you're talking about artificial intelligence, you're talking about self-driving cars, you're talking about all kinds of things, and 5G is coming in now, okay? I think the situation, personally, I think the situation is going to get more complicated. That there will be people who will take more advantage of the greater power. So if we're at 100 times right now, and we multiply it by 100 times, can you imagine how many new internet messages can come in to Facebook from fake accounts? Unless they get a handle on it and figure out a way to stop it, and unless the government gets in and begins regulating things. And then we get into scary territory, because there's the dilemma of how much do you regulate, who censors what, and how much freedom of the press is violated, freedom of speech could be violated. And so those are the other side of the coin. But in the meantime, your privacy should be protected. If you don't want certain things out there, you shouldn't be able to have them out there. But you don't know. And your friends don't know, and the people who friended you don't, and you don't know what your friends are doing either, okay? Those are problems. And the solution to those, I'm not sure how you're going to do it. I think 5G could exacerbate it. Next question.
The government can regulate all they want to do, but when the courts get it and the freedom of speech is in opposition to whatever regulation they come up with, so first of all, you're going to have a ton of litigation, and then whatever the result is no good anyway.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, ultimately, remember that a lot of times laws don't come into effect until they're challenged. And when they're challenged, then the law gets involved, judges get involved. And how judges determine cases, going all the way up to the Supreme Court, will have a factor here. And the Supreme Court has been very reluctant to reduce your right to free speech. And so you can bet that that is going to be heavily weighing on those judges all the way through the system. And that's what those guys like Zuckerberg are saying. We're not in the business of censoring. They don't want to be the censors. Because how do you know what they're going to do? How do you know what political side they're on? So who's going to censor it? It's a complicated question, don't you see? Next question.
As an adult, I think we've all learned substantially a lot about the topic you're talking about. But my concern is the children and grandchildren who don't listen to their elders.
They don't listen to their elders?
Well, maybe in some cases. How do we get the message across to the younger people of all these things we should be looking at or they shouldn't be doing? Are there sites to do this? Are there movies or what? So that we can get something across to the children of the dangers they're putting everybody in.
Yeah, good question. And there are lots of sites, how to protect your privacy, and there's things on YouTube that you can watch. Some of them are, I was looking at them, and some of them are fairly complex. I really think that the best way of getting the information out to your grandkids is through you. And yes, they may not always listen, but I think they're going to be more likely to listen to you, somebody with experience, somebody who cares. Sit them down and talk to them. Ask them if they've ever thought about certain things. Ask them questions. Have you ever thought about what happens to your email address when you put it online? Have you ever thought about what happens to a video that you take of a party and put it on Facebook? Have you ever wondered if an employer could ever find that and look at that? Would that ever cost you a job? That might make a difference. Give them some information. That would help. Yeah, next one.
Well, this makes me think, because I have seen recently on some brand new websites at the bottom a box that I could check that says, do not sell my private information. And I've never seen that before. Just in the last couple of weeks I've noticed that. Is that related to your new law in California?
I think it could very well be. It could very well be. And another thing, some of these companies are saying, let's take action ahead of the government regulating us. If they do that, then they can say, hey, this is our idea, this hurts us less, because if we don't take the action, the government might take stronger action, which could hurt us more. So that might be getting ahead of the game and paying it forward. And it also might be part of the California law. But I think these companies are looking forward to more regulation somehow that's going to happen, because it looks like that's where it's going. Next.
Could you just repeat how it was that I could share this lecture by going to the Rancho Mirage website or whatever it is?
Yes,
And
thank you for that.
One second thing, just is there more information about the California law that we can look up? Is that something we'd find on YouTube?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. Yeah, you can look up the California law that I talked about, and any of these videos were available through YouTube. And there's lots of other information out there. This is just a sampling that we've provided for you today. So yeah, absolutely, you can find out more. But getting back to the video, I understand that they videotaped this presentation today, and you can access it by going to YouTube. And adding to that percentage of users that are using YouTube, and putting you just YouTube Rancho Mirage Library presentation, something along those lines. That's what you type in to the search box when you go to youtube.com, and you can access this video today, as well as the video we had last week from LIR. And by the way, since you reminded me, next week there is no program, as I understand it, because it's a holiday, right? President's Day. However, the following Monday, the 24th of February, we have Dr. Ralph Sinibaldi, who is a very well-renowned geneticist. And he's going to be here to talk to you about biotechnology and society, and some very interesting information from a person who knows it from the inside. I think you're going to find that really interesting. He's another one of our LIR people who has done a class for the last several years, and really interesting stuff. So you might want to mark that date down, the 24th. And another date to make a note of is that our spring registration will be up on the website, LIR website, February 18th, which is a week from tomorrow. And it goes up at 9 in the morning, and if you go to our website, you will see that. So you don't have to remember it. You can go to our website, lirpalmdesert.com, and you'll see when the next registration is, and the list of classes that we have down below, which might change a little bit before they actually publish it. But some of our classes close very quickly. And so if you're going to be around for March for this spring and you want to take a class, you should go on that website at 9 a.m. on the 18th if you want first dibs, because for 5 classes for $60, we have a lot of interest. All right? And they're good classes. All right? Other questions? Anybody else?
So
yeah.
These are global companies.
Yes.
And they're being reviewed by our Congress.
Right.
But how do they circumvent the more restrictive international standards, Japan, Europe? How do they get around that if they're a global company?
Apparently they can tailor their programs to markets. And that's exactly what's happened, because the privacy rules in Europe and the European Union have been much tighter than ours. And yet they're still stealing your data. So they are tailoring their access to you in the same way that governments can shut down the internet or parts of the internet to its citizens. They have control over that. Next.
Is Facebook immune from libel laws?
I'm not an attorney, so I can't answer that question, but I think it's complicated in terms of their liability to libel laws. I think it's very complicated in the same way that TV ads are. It seems that they're not, because they can put false stuff on there. And we already know about all of the misrepresentative and false information that's been put on these social media networks, and they've been able to get away with it. They were indicted. The Russian Internet Agency was indicted by the Mueller investigation, but those guys are in Russia. They can't serve any time over here. They can't stand trial over here. So our ability to control what they're doing, whether it's Russia, China, Iran, or wherever it is somewhat limited. So I think those libel laws are very weak in terms of that media. Question over here and over here.
When I'm on Facebook, and if a friend posts a picture of their family reunion, I hit like because I'm too lazy to write a comment about it. Is there a danger? Is Mark Zuckerberg learning something about me because I hit like?
I don't think Mark Zuckerberg's going to know much about it, to tell you the truth. But the internet in the sky might know something about it. I don't know. It's tough to say. I don't think you want to be too paranoid about this or worried too much about this stuff. I think you just want to be cautious of the information you put on the web and put online, your private information. I think that's what you want to worry about. You want to worry about what you click and what you put out there. And you want to set your defaults to more privacy. Yeah. Who else?
On that very interesting and useful question about libel.
Yeah.
I don't know the libel law in this country. I suspect the social media are not immune from the libel laws. And I suspect one of the problems is that, so somebody sues, there's litigation, and it goes on forever, and it's very expensive, and I think that's sort of part of that story.
It might be, but I have not heard yet. I mean, there could be millions of cases out there already. We haven't heard about them. So that's why I'm thinking, and again, I'm not an expert on this legally, but I'm thinking that some of those laws don't apply in the same way they don't apply to TV networks that put out false political ads.
Sorry, just one last comment. In terms of the laws of libel and slander, I don't know that the medium as such is what matters, the fact that the offending, if you will, material is distributed by whatever means. Anyway,
Yep. Okay, thank you. Thank you. Okay, let's take 2 more questions. This gentleman on the end over here, and there's a woman right in front. Oh, there's somebody over. I guess we got about 3 more. Go ahead.
I just wanted to, I'm just thinking out loud. The amendment refers to the spoken word, our freedom of speech. A lot of this is the written word. So I think there's a lot of room for taking action on what we are printing, not saying. Yes, we can have freedom of expression, but there has to be a law for the written word.
Yeah, usually libel laws cover the written word and slander laws cover the oral word, and there's laws for both. But again, how they apply to these it doesn't appear at least that there's a great deal of control here. Otherwise, we'd see lawsuits coming out our ears. We don't see that. Okay, I think we have 2 more people.
Okay, is this on? Yes. Okay. When you read an article and the following appears, by reading this, you agree with the terms of the cookies. So, what do you do? And yeah, you can go try to find the cookies, but that's the second job.
Yeah, so what he's talking about is there's these things called cookies, which are ways of tracking your internet activity, whatever site you're on. And you can clear the cookies. You can eliminate the cookies if you want to by going to the settings menu. But then certain sites, you won't be able to get on those sites anymore because the only way you can get on those sites is to accept the cookies. So next time you're on one of those sites, just say, I want pistachio, chocolate chip, and oatmeal. One more question.
Okay, have the school system, am I right?
Where are you at?
Me, right here?
Okay.
Okay. Have the school systems ever looked into doing classes for like grade school children and middle school on internet education?
You know, I would love them to do it. I have no idea. I've been out of the school system for a few years. I know when I was in it, and we had the internet then, it was 10 years ago, I retired from that. There was nothing. But I will tell you, and this is a little aside on education today in the public school system, that testing is very important. And because of testing, there's a lot of things that teachers do not have time to do that are beyond the set curriculum of the state of California, because the students are going to be tested on that curriculum. The schools are going to have a report card on how their students are doing, okay? The state is going to have, and schools that are not performing on their standardized tests are going to have to face consequences. And as a result of all that, what I saw the last several years I was working in the system, there's a lot less time to do things like that. You wish that there were some classes that could, and hopefully there may be, but there's less time for it. I want to thank all of you for coming today. I appreciate your time.